it's Lisa. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be using the fishbowl fold it die set from the Stamps of Life to make a card. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's actually a fishbowl shaped card, and it is A2 in size, so it will fit in a standard A2 size envelope. And this is the die that actually makes the fishbowl. So you have your shadow, and then you have your layering piece. And then you have all these fun goodies. And these are just dies to make your rocks. You also have a die here for the water ripple. And then there's some more rocks, and there's some leaves, some more rocks, and then just some long stems. So we're gonna go ahead and have fun with this today. I initially thought I was going to just use it to make a flat card, but I think I'm gonna use it to make a shaker card today. So by looking at these dies, you have your large die, which will make your card base. So if you wanted to just do a fishbowl shaped card, I know a lot of you are familiar with how to make these shaped cards. It says place fold here or place fold here. You can have the card open from the top or from the side. And I'll show you a little bit more on how to do that a little bit later when we make the card base. But this die is what you would use to make your actual layering piece. If you wanted to do a flat card, or if you wanted to do a shaker card, you would need to cut out a frame and use both of these dies together. So they would have to be layered just like this together to cut out a frame. And that is what this will look like. And it actually cuts out, there's some stitching along the edges, and this would be your frame to make your shaker card. And if you did not want to make a shaker card, you don't have to use these together. You can just use these separately, and by die cutting this piece separately, you get these two pieces. So you get the actual water, and then you get the top part. And what I've done is I die cut this out of some Bristol Smooth cardstock because I'm gonna be doing some ink blending now. So now if you wanted to take this die and die cut it on some solid blue cardstock for your water, you can do that, or you can find some pattern paper, maybe some pattern paper that looks like water, and die cut that. But we're gonna be doing some ink blending on here, so that's why I chose to use the Bristol Smooth cardstock. So I wanna start with the ink blending to get my water, and then I'm gonna show you how we can turn this into a shaker card. So I'm going to start out just by putting some tape on the back of this die cut piece and adhering it to my mat, and then I'm going to be using my blending brushes. I'm going to start with the pool ink at the very bottom, and once I add the pool ink, I'm going to come in with the ocean, and then the very top will be the sea glass. So I'm just going to dab my ink blending tool into my ink pad, put some ink on here, and then just continue in that process. So next I'm just going to take my water and I'm going to spray it just so that I can get some wet on there, some water droplets, and then let that sit for just a second. And then I'm just going to take a paper towel, and I'm just gonna soak up that water with the paper towel. And look at that fun texture that it gives that background. Isn't that fun? So once you have the middle part done that has the water, you can pretty much be almost finished with this card if you want to just make it a flat card. So you can take your large shadow die, which is this one, die cut a piece of cardstock, which gives me this, and you can add your water, and then you can add your fish. Now I'm just using some fish that I had previously colored. I don't even know if I'm gonna use all of these, but these are just some fish here from the Fish Tank to Stamp set. And then the larger fish are from the Fish to Stamp set. So add your fish into your fish tank, and then if you wanted to, you can just add the top here, and you can basically add a few rocks, add a sentiment, and be done with your fish tank if you wanted to make it a flat card. If you wanted to add a little bit more decoration, you can take both of these dies, die cut them together, get a stitched border like this, and you can actually put a border around that just to add a little bit more wow to your card. Okay, so, but I'm not gonna make it a flat card. As I said, I'm gonna make it a shaker card. So I wanna go ahead and finish the process for that. So I need to go ahead and die cut this top piece. I'm just gonna take a piece of scrap paper. In reality, I could have used the piece that came out of the Bristol Smooth cardstock when I cut that, but it's a different color white. So I just wanted to be a little bit consistent with the powdered sugar cardstock that I used here and make it the same color white. So I'm just gonna die cut the top portion of that. So next I'm gonna go ahead and stamp out my sentiment, and I'm gonna try and get it on this little strip that I die cut. And I'm gonna go ahead and stamp it now, because if it doesn't fit quite right, then I know that I will just have to stamp my sentiment inside the fishbowl. And I'll need to be able to do that before I start, you know, turning this into a shaker card. And look at that, that fit perfectly, so I'm really pleased. That sentiment's from the Fish Tank to Stamp set, so that fit perfectly in that strip. So next I want to go ahead and add some sand here at the bottom. So I'm going to take my border die and I'm going to die cut some ginger snap cardstock. And that gives me this piece. So now I'm going to take my ginger snap ink and I'm just going to put some ink along the edges just to add some texture here. And I'm gonna blot a little bit here along the top of this. I'm obviously not gonna use this entire piece of cardstock, so I'm just doing the top. Next, I'm gonna take my chocolate ink, and I'm also using the sand stamp from the Island to Visit set. And I'm just going to dab some sand here just along the top of this cardstock. And that just adds for some more dimension. Now, if you don't have this stamp, you can also take a brown marker and you can just put little dots along this border. So next I'm gonna add this to my water. And when I put glue on this, I am not gonna put glue all the way at the top of the border, because I might want to tuck some leaves in to this border. So I might want to just tuck up behind the border. So I just do make sure I want to get it, and I don't even know if it's going to come all the way up on the side, but I can always add glue to it a little bit later. But just want to keep some of the glue off the very top edge. So basically along the stitching, underneath that stitching is where I'm adding my glue. And then just decide how far you want this to come up. And then I'm just gonna flip that over and I'm just gonna cut off any of the excess cardstock that's extending beyond the fishbowl. So next I took these large dies that are the long leaves, and I just die cut 3 of them out of some artichoke cardstock. Just kind of place them where I want them, and I'm gonna go ahead and just add some glue and then add those to my card. And when I add them, I'm gonna make sure that it is tucked behind that sand. So next I'm gonna just start positioning these fish. So I was debating if I was gonna add rocks or not. I guess I'll go ahead and do that. I just cut a few rocks, and these are in the cloud cardstock. And I'm just going to ink them up with the cloud ink. And I will add those to my card layer. I'm going to take this little bubble stamp, and that's from the Fish Tank to Stamp set, and I'm just gonna add a few bubbles. So I just added this little fish to the top here to cover up the messed up bubble that I had on there when I stamped it out. I layered this piece onto the large shadow piece. I just added that with some glue. And now I'm going to take this sentiment and I'm going to add it to the top. So we're just gonna flip this over, add some glue, and then we'll just go ahead and put that right down. Okay, so when you add that, just make sure it's all the way flush with your water so that when you put your layer around, there's no extra gaps in that. Okay, so now you can leave it as this. So if you wanted to, you can actually put this on a card front, or you can turn this into a folded card by putting it on the fishbowl shaped card base, which we'll do that later, but I just wanted to show you, you can be done at this point. Now I also want to point out that if you are not going to be using a sentiment here, so maybe you have a sentiment that you want to use that will not fit here, you can always stamp your sentiment on the inside of this bowl. Just plan that ahead of time, because as you can see right now, I don't have room for a sentiment. So if I were to plan it ahead of time, I probably could have cut down some of these leaves and removed a fish and put a sentiment here. But now we're going to turn this into a shaker card. So we have this fishbowl die. Actually, there's two dies here. So you have the larger die on the outside and then the smaller die on the inside. And I've just added some washi tape to both sides to keep this together. And I'm going to die cut this to create a frame. So this is going to be the frame of my fishbowl. So if you wanted to, you can add a frame for an accent on your flat card. But instead, we're going to use several cardstock pieces to build up a wall so that we can put our shaker bits inside. So it's very important that you keep this adhered together using your washi tape before you run it through your die cut machine. So I've already die cut my frames, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames that I've die cut. So I'm going to take 5 of them and layer those up. And then 2 of them I'm going to set aside. And when you are die cutting your cardstock, it could be any color you want, but I suggest using some scraps because I did not want to use up a lot of my powdered sugar Stamps of Life cardstock because that's really good quality cardstock. So I just went in my stash and got some scraps, you know, just maybe some white cardstock that I picked up from the local craft store to die cut these layers. Now, you can always, instead of doing the cardstock way like I do, you can take this die and die cut a layer of foam and then just do 1 piece for the top. But I don't like to use foam because foam, sometimes when I use it, it just gets distorted and gets really sticky inside, and I'm just not a big fan of foam. So I like to use cardstock to build up my wall to contain my shaker bits and then just layer it up. Now another thing, if you don't want to die cut so many pieces of cardstock, you can take this die and you can die cut some chipboard pieces and maybe a few pieces of chipboard and then a piece of cardstock for the top. So that's really up to you. So I'm going to start out by taking the first 5 fishbowl dies, the outer frame, and layer those up, and I'm going to leave 2 off to the side. So remember I told you to save 2 of your pieces and put them aside. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 more piece to this. And the reason I initially told you to set it aside was because I was going to have you take your acetate and just put your acetate on top of this and glue it down and then just trim the acetate away. But instead, I went ahead and took this large die and die cut a piece of acetate because this actually will fit perfectly to go over the top of the fishbowl. Now, what I did find when I die cut this with my acetate, the cut didn't go all the way through. So I did end up having to use my scissors and just trace around the cut line. And I also want to let you know that if you are using your acetate and die cutting it, you need to make sure that your cutting blades on your die cut machine are not, like, they need to be super clean, because if they're not super clean, you're gonna end up getting little marks in your acetate and it just won't be pretty. So if you don't have super clean plates, I do suggest you take that 6 frame and go ahead and just put your cardstock or your acetate on top. It will extend beyond the edges and it's perfectly fine. You're gonna put glue along the top of this frame, add your acetate. You'll need to let it sit for a good few minutes until it's completely dry. Take your scissors and then just trim along the outside and you'll have your frame. And then you'll take that frame and you will add that acetate frame directly to the top of your fishbowl after you put your pieces inside. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is I am going to go ahead and, because I did cut my acetate with my die cutting machine, I'm just going to take that 6th layer and I'm going to just add some glue just like I did with the previous 5 and add that to my fishbowl. And I still have one more layer that I have put aside for the top cover, okay? So before I add my acetate, I'm gonna go ahead and add some pieces in here, and I'm just using some sequins. I don't wanna add a whole bunch. Now I also wanna mention that depending on how thick the shaker pieces are that you're using, you may need to add more cardstock layers to build up your wall even further. My pieces are not too thick, so the 6 pieces that I have here to build my wall, they should be perfectly fine. I don't want to add too much because I don't want to take away from this cute little scene, but I do want to have something in here to be able to shake. And when I'm adding these sequins, I do want to make sure they're not doubled up. So make sure that, you know, you don't want to make sure they're not layered like that. You want to make sure that they are, you know, just one sequence is laying flat so that when you put your acetate, it's not too thick. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just add glue just along the top of this frame. And I did get a little bit of glue in here, so I'm just gonna wipe that up with my finger. And then I'm gonna take my acetate. Just make sure that your acetate is cleaned off. So if you need to use something, I'm just using my fingers here, just to make sure it is clean and free from dust particles. And then just add that right to the top. I like to take an acrylic block and just hold that on there and let that sit and dry before I start manipulating this any further. So once it's fully dry, if you need to go in with your scissors and just trim off any excess acetate, because remember I said that I actually had to come in and trim because, I don't know, it didn't die cut the whole thing correctly. So if you need to trim any off, you can just take your small scissors and just do that, just to make sure there's no long pieces extending beyond the edges. And then once you have it the way that you want it, then you're going to take your last layering piece and you are going to add that to the top. Okay, just like that. And what that does is it covers up the glue and it covers up your acetate. So I'm just gonna take this last piece. And by the way, if you wanted that top piece to be a different color, this is the time to do it. You can always just die cut this with a different color cardstock and add that to the top. So it doesn't have to be white. It could be any color you want. Just gonna smooth out that glue. And then just add that right over top. And then make sure you let that dry as well. And look at that. There is your shaker fishbowl. So next we're gonna make the actual card base. So this step right here is needed whether you're making it a shaker or not, because if you want to make it as into a fishbowl shaped card, you'll need to do this piece. So you're gonna take a piece of cardstock, whatever you want for the inside of your card, and you're gonna fold it in half like I did. And you can either have your card open from the side, and if you want it opening from the side, just put the fold in the cardstock immediately to the right of the die. If you want it to open from the top, just put the fold in the cardstock immediately below the die opening. And I'm gonna go ahead and have mine open from the top, and then I'm just gonna tape that down and run that through my die cutting machine. So when that comes out of the die cut machine, there's your card base. So now all we're gonna do is take the actual shaker card, and we're going to put glue on the back of it, and we're going to add it to the card base. So just line that up and then press that down. And there is your fishbowl shaped card. Now, what I want to mention is so that you guys don't do the same thing that happened to me, is that when I added my shaker bits and there was still glue in here that was not fully dry, and then I started shaking it like this, and one of the shaker bits got caught up in that glue and I can't get it down. So just keep that in mind as you are recreating this card. So don't start shaking your card until you know that your glue is completely dry on the inside, okay? So that was from the layer that I put on underneath that acetate layer. So just keep that in mind, which it's okay. I mean, it doesn't really bother me, but I just wanted to point that out. So there is my shaker card. I think it turned out so cute. So leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you thought of this card. And be sure to subscribe for more card making inspiration. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.